Mesdames et messieurs, chers actionnaires, bienvenue à l'Assemblée générale.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear shareholders. This AGM is an important moment in the life of our organization, a moment dear to us all. This is my opportunity to share with you the sense of our strategy, where we're going, and to have a dialogue with you. All the members of the Executive Committee are here with you to take all your questions if you have any. To my right, I have Mona Seperi, who is the EVPC at the CEO's office, Stéphane Muller, who is the Chief Performance Officer, Marie-Françoise Damzin, in charge of Human Resources. To my left, Thierry Bolloré, who is the Chief Competitiveness Officer, and Clotilde Delbos, who is the new Chief Financial Officer. Mrs. Delbos has just been appointed after Dominique Tormann's early retirement because of health reasons. He was a remarkable officer for the last six years. We have to pay tribute to his commitment, his determination, and the high quality of his work, both for Nissan indeed and for Renault as part of the alliance. We also have Thierry Toscas, who is head of sales and marketing, Bruno Ancelin, who is product planning and program manager. We have Jean-Christophe Kugler, EVP, chairman of the Europe region, Jean-Vicente de los Mozos, EVP, in charge of manufacturing and supply chain, Christophe van den Hende, EVP, in charge of quality and customer satisfaction, Gaspard Gascon-Abellan, in charge of EVP, in charge of engineering, and members, of course, of the Renault CODIR. Mr. Thomas, who is an independent director and chair of the Compensation Committee, is also on stage. And to my left, Anne-Sophie Lelay, who is head of Legal Affairs, can provide the running of this session. We have Mr. Jean Séverin, who represents the French government's shareholdership agency, and Mr. Cédric Laverie, who represents the Amundi Asset Management Company. And they're all sitting next to Patrick Thomas. So let's move on to the agenda. To begin with, Mrs. Delbos, who will present the financial performance of the group for 2015, and as well as the revenue for Q1 2016. Laurent Desplaces, our auditor, will give us a summary report of the auditor's report. And then I will highlight the priorities for the group in 2015, our outlook for 2016. Mrs. Seperi and Mr. Thomas will discuss governance, and then we'll have 1 hour for Q&A, and then move on to the resolutions. After the vote, around 6 p.m., we will have refreshments for all of us. I'll give the floor to Mrs. Lelay, who will give us the provisional quorum. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, so as to conduct a business legally on this first convention, this AGM requires 1/5 of the shares with voting rights, i.e. 49,570,665 shares. For the extraordinary part, we need a quorum equal to 1/4 of the shares with voting rights, i.e. 61,963,331 shares. The total number of shares making up the share capital with voting right is 247,853,324 shares. The provisional attendance sheet stands now for present or represented shareholders or those who voted by mail, 72.53% of the share, more than 1/4 of the shares with voting rights. And so, therefore, the quorums have been met, and so the AGM can conduct business legally, both for the ordinary part and the extraordinary part. All the legal documents are on this desk. The final attendance sheet is being finalized and will be, of course, seen prior to voting. In line with rules and regulations, the documents and the relevant documents for the items on the agenda were made available through the invitation, the registration document, and indeed at headquarters plus online at Renault.com. You have, therefore, in these documents, the presentation of the text and the resolutions, the information relative to directors whose appointment or renewal is being discussed, the report of the Board of Directors to the AGM, report of the CEO on internal audit, all the reports of the auditors, the details of the share buyback program, and indeed the report on the financial performance over the past years. We have as many as 21 resolutions, 12 resolutions for the ordinary part of the session. Resolutions 1 and 2 is the approval of the consolidated accounts and annual accounts for 2015. Resolution 3, which is the allocation of the profits of 2015. Resolution number 4 is the related party agreements under Article L222538 of the French Code of Commerce, and such as have been authorized in previous years. Resolution number 5, this is the adoption of an agreement between Renault and the French government. Resolution number 6, an agreement between Renault and Nissan. Resolution number 7, the report of the auditors on those items determining the interest served on the redeemable shares. Resolution 8, the compensation package for the CEO for 2015. Resolution number 9, the renewal of the director's mandate of Mr. Thierry Demaret. Resolution number 10, appointment of a new director, Mrs. Olivia Kiu. Resolution number 11, an authorization given to the board to effect transactions on shares of the company. And then we have the extraordinary part of the resolutions. Number 12, authorizations to the Board of Directors to cancel treasury shares. Resolution 13, authorization to for the Board of Directors to allocate performance shares to employees and corporate officers of the group. Resolutions 14 to 18, authorizations for the Board of Directors to issue shares or other securities giving access to the company's capital with or without preferential subscription rights. Resolution 19, an authorization given to the Board of Directors to increase the company's capital by including reserves, profits, or bonuses. And Resolution 20, an authorization given to the Board of Directors to have a employee program of capital increase without preferential subscription rights. And finally, Resolution 21 is the resolution that belongs to the ordinary AGM to meet formalities and other technical specificities. So these are the resolutions. After the presentations, Mr. Carlos Ghosn and members of the Executive Committee will answer your questions during the Q&A session. Those questions that were put in writing prior to the session are answered online, and you can read them in keeping with legal provisions. And regarding the vote, no more voting boxes will be given after 4 p.m. So please keep that box with you, and during the vote, you will have a video showing you how to work it. And then, of course, at the end of this session, please return these remote controls. Now, I'll give the floor to our CEO, Mr. Ghosn. Yes, and thank you, Mrs. Lilly. This is, of course, an important opportunity to exchange and share on the performance of the company. Indeed, in this period, on the 15th of April, a number of shareholders shared with members of the Executive Committee on the development of Renault. Let's listen to them.
Bienvenue, bonjour à toutes.
Welcome and good morning. It's an opportunity to see you here in this company, which is yours. Renault is doing well. 2015 was a record year in terms of growth. This is something that was long in the making. We've worked hard on products, on design, on technology, and indeed on our markets. As usual, Mr. Ghosn's messages are crystal clear. 10% growth, 5% operating profit. I'm very proud of Renault, no more debt. This was most exciting because we can see that Renault has promising opportunities, has a promising future. Beautiful design. This is very much what we were looking for. We're very happy with these cars. When you see such a car on the road, you recognize it for what it is. I'm very confident in the future of Renault. It's an innovative company rolling out new cars with new technologies. There's lots of innovation in these cars, and I do believe also in the future of the electric car. I will buy one as soon as it becomes available. We've invested a lot in Asia, in Russia, in India, and if we compare the sales performance in India this year compared to last year, it's day and night, and I'm very pleased with the launch of the Quid, and I'm very confident about the future. Well, India and China are very promising markets. Renault is both cautious and bold at the same time. Well, we have conquered Europe, and now we have to reach out to the rest of the world. Mr. Ghosn's strategy has really paid off because after 7 years of hard work, we can tell the results today. Right then, well now, without further ado, I'll give the floor to Mrs. Delbos, our new Chief Financial Officer, who will present the group's financial performance. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is for me to introduce the sales and financial performance of the group in 2015 and the first quarter of 2016. First, the sales performance. All the objectives were met. We have an increase in registrations and revenue on a constant exchange rate basis. The current operating profit for the automotive portion and the group as a whole has considerably improved since 2014, and we have a positive automotive free cash flow. And thanks to these successes, we were able to pursue growth in what was, after all, a volatile context in emerging countries. Let's take a closer look at these results. Starting with the total industry volume. Volumes were on the up in 2015. 87 million cars sold throughout the world. This 1.6% growth was basically fueled by the Chinese, North American, and European markets. Europe had a better recovery than the rest of the world, since total industry volume was up 9.4% in 2015. Conversely, in our main emerging countries, there was a gradual deterioration of the markets, especially in Brazil and Russia. In this background, nonetheless, the group for the third time running had an increase in the number of registrations, up 3.3% to reach the record high of 2.8 million cars registered. You can see that growth in Europe certainly offset the decline in emerging countries. Regarding the Renault brand, it accounted for 77% of the sales of the group in 2015, and registrations were up 2.4%. Renault once again made major headway in Europe thanks to the remarkable and persistent success of Clio, Twingo, and Captur, and so therefore the brand remains a leader on segments A and B in Europe. The successful launches of Kadjar and the new Espace in 2015 were an addition to this resounding success. Outside Europe, registrations were down 4.8%, mostly because of the decline in the Russian and Brazilian markets. Nonetheless, Renault was able to stabilize and indeed strengthen its positions internationally. This is notably the case in the Africa, Middle East, India region, where the Renault brand made a headway. While the market was down 1.6%, it had an increase in its sales to the tune of almost 17%. Renault's market share in that region was up 0.7 percentage points and now stands at 4.5%. You should also know the performance in Eurasia, where our market share grew 1.6 points to 11.9%. For example, Renault established a record high in Turkey with sales up with registrations up 22%. Looking more specifically at Dacia, 10 years after its launch in Europe, Dacia enjoyed a new 7.7% growth in registrations in 2015, with record sales of 551,000 new registrations. All in all, cars sold under the brand Dacia accounted for 19.7% of all the group sales. Finally, RSM had a slight decline of sales after a remarkable growth in 2014. That slowdown was due to the end-of-life cycle of SM5 and then SM7 models, which were replaced in March 2016 by the new SM6. It should also be pointed out that Renault Samsung Motors continued manufacturing Rogue, sold under the name Nissan in the US. Let's take a look at the financial performance after the sales performance. You have the income statement on this page. You have three items: significant growth in revenue, significant improvement of current operating profit, and a remarkable growth in net income. The first line, so revenue, 45.327 billion euros compared with 41.55 in 2014. That growth of revenue, 10.4%, is higher than registrations. This is due to the success of models launched on the top end with higher selling prices in a dynamic European market. Another reason for this performance is the contribution of our partners such as Nissan or Daimler. On the second line, you have the operating profit, 2.320 billion euros. The 711 million improvement is wholly attributable to the automotive branch. The contribution of associated companies stood at 1.371 billion euros in 2015, stable compared to 2014. Nissan's better performance being offset by the recognition of a negative contribution of Aftervas. The line others, other operating charges and expenses and income, interest and taxes is negative, 731 million euros, but a 242 million improvement compared to 2014, because 2014 had significant restructuring costs because of the competitiveness agreement in France, but also the downsizing of capacity outside Europe, or rather the right sizing of capacity outside Europe. All in all, the net income after tax stands at 2.960 billion euros, up almost 1 billion euros compared with 2014. For the second year running, the financial position was strengthened in 2015. Once again, we have positive operational free cash flow for the automotive sector because of the improvement in our operating profit, a very tight management of our working capital requirements, and also a good control of capital expenditure made possible because of the alliance with Nissan and other partners. The balance sheet is even sounder, therefore. At end 2015, we have a net cash position of 2.7 billion euros, up 600 million euros compared to 2014. As you can see on this slide, the positive development of the financial position of the organization over the past few years has made it possible to increase the dividends per share. In keeping with our dividends policy that was announced, what is being proposed today is the payout of 2.40 euros per share for the year 2015. This amount is up 50 cents compared to 2014, i.e. 26.3%. Before closing, a couple of words about revenue in Q1 2016, published last Thursday. On the first 3 months of the year, registrations were up 7.3%, whereas the TIV was only up 1.5%. In Europe, where confidence is being rebuilt, sales were up 9% in the market, where the overall market is up 8%, and the group's market share is almost 10%. Outside Europe, we've enjoyed a 4.7% increase in our sales in spite of the significant drop in both our major emerging markets, Russia and Brazil. All in all, then, revenue for the group in Q1 2016 was 11.7% compared to last year at 10.489 billion euros. The growth is attributable not just to dynamic sales under our own brands, but also sales to our partners, especially Nissan and Daimler. By way of conclusion, let us take a look at the price share compared with the CAC 40 index since last year. The price of the Renault share resisted the pressure on CAC 40, which lost 9 points over the period, whereas Renault only lost 6 points in what is 6% in a very volatile environment. This is also to be compared with the 25% drop in the automotive industry. Looking at the composite index, the good performance of the group in 2015 and in Q1 2016 was recognized by two rating agencies. Moody's raised our rate to investment grade, and Standard & Poor's has added a positive outlook to its already investment grade rating. This is a tribute to our Renault's capacity to meet its objectives under Renault Drive the Change. And now I give the floor to our CEO. Thank you. And now I will ask Mr. Diplas, our auditor, to introduce his report. So, ladies and gentlemen, as a summary report of the auditors, let me draw your attention to the various reports prepared for the AGM. They have been made available to the company, and you have a full copy of these reports in the registration documents. So this is a brief summary. For 2015, our reports address the items listed on the screen: consolidated and individual accounts, related party agreements, interest served on redeemable shares, report of the chairman of the board on internal auditing and corporate governance, and then 4 reports on operations considered by the company and with an impact on the share capital. Regarding the first report, the accounts were certified without reservations for 2015. The work conducted to arrive at this position took into account, of course, the specificities of this company and the risks inherent in its activity. A number of items of assessment are described in our report. We ensured that the estimates made by the company, especially regarding the development costs of the are probably taken into account, as well as deferred benefits under the French tax integration system. We made sure that these estimates were realistic. We also ensured that the equity method for Nissan and AvtoVAZ was appropriate for those companies. Regarding AvtoVAZ, we also considered the way in which Renault assessed the recoverable part of its net investment in that company, as that company, AvtoVAZ, was depreciated in 2015. Finally, the annual accounts for Renault SA for 2015 were also certified without reservations and do not warrant any further comments. Regarding the ordinary AGM, we have 3 additional reports. The first report under resolutions 4, 5, and 6 address related party agreements, i.e. conventions between Renault and corporate officers or companies with directors that sit on both boards. 2 new conventions were offered and had an early approval by the board of directors. The stabilization agreement with the alliances that were signed and by Nissan and on the one hand and the French government on the other. You also have conventions and commitments that were approved for previous years and that were continued in 2015. There's a second report to do with the 7th resolution on the interest served on redeemable shares. We make sure that the variable part of that remuneration is consistent with the terms of reference for the issuance of such shares and the numbers found in the consolidated accounts. Report number 3 deals with the report by the chairman of the board on corporate governance and internal audit. That report describes the internal audit and risk management system for the organizations, and as well as the governance policy of Renault. This warrants no further comments. Finally, under the extraordinary part of the AGM, we have 4 reports on issues liable to have an impact on the share capital. These operations are in keeping with the provisions of the French Code of Commerce and therefore warrant no special comments. Regarding the issuance of shares or securities under resolutions 14 and 18, as well as 20. The final terms and conditions have not been decided, and therefore we have no opinion at this stage, neither on the issue of preferential subscription rights. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Mr. Deplace.
Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to say a few words about our achievements in 2015 and our outlook for 2016.
Mesdames, Messieurs, Renault va bien.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, the first thing I can say is that Renault is doing well. In 2015, for the 3rd consecutive year, our sales increased by 3.3% compared to 2014. We sold 2.8 million cars, which is once again a peak for the group. This dynamism has been buoyed up by the Renault brand, mainly, which today now has a very strong and enriched lineup, and that is being renewed. This sales performance has been translated into our financial results and has contributed to our COP, which has gone beyond 5%. The COP, our operating profit, is one of the main objectives of our strategic plan, Renault Drive the Change, and has therefore been achieved 2 years before the deadline. Our challenge now is to continue to grow the group in order to achieve our second objective, which is 50 billion euros of turnover, while at the same time continuing to ensure that the COP progresses to a level that is higher, of course, than 5%. Now, these results are also the fruit of the strategy that we have been deploying for several years at the service of 3 objectives. First of all, reinforcing Renault's position as the leading French car maker, sustainably positioning Renault as the second biggest car maker in Europe, and thirdly, yesterday establishing the Renault-Nissan Alliance as being among the top 3 worldwide car makers. Now, our product offensive and our international developments in 2015 and 2016 have ensured that we are on the right track, and our alliance with Nissan is a major advantage in the worldwide competition that our industry is subject to. Before developing these points, I suggest that we should take a quick look at our main achievements in 2015 in a video. Now, our performance is based on several pillars. Of course, the growth of our sales, but also the performance of our bank, RCI Bank and Services, which has had a record year in 2015 with a record increase of 26%. Now, as well as our after-sales activity, which is once again growing after 4 years of reduction. Its turnover today has gone up by 4% to stand at 4 billion euros. Today, for one new vehicle sold, on an average, we have a service contract that is sold, and in addition to that, more than one new vehicle out of 3 that is sold is financed by RCI Bank. And the growth of our sales is also to be placed at the credit of our new models. In 2015, we launched 5 new vehicles: Espace, Kadjar, and Talisman in Europe, Quid in India, and the Duster Oroch in Brazil. In Europe, our new models were very positively received. Kadjar is the second biggest seller in its segment in France, just behind the Duster. The new Espace has had more than 21,000 registration, that is to say 3 times more than its previous version in 2014. The attractiveness of our design has been confirmed. Talisman was given the Most Beautiful Car of the Year award this year in the International Automotive Festival in France in January, and this performance was also supported by the sales of our LCVs, which has increased by 17% in 2014. We are thus still leaders in the market of LCVs in Europe over the last and have been for the last 18 years. Renault Kwid has made a difference in India. This entry-level car has really stood out through its modernity and its competitiveness, and the orders have gone well beyond our expectations, and I would like to congratulate here all the Kwid teams who received the President's Award for 2015. We are the leading European automotive brand in India with sales that have progressed by 20%. In Latin America, the 2015 was actually marked by our entry into the segment of pickup trucks with the Oroch, a model based on the Duster with a half-ton load capacity. This vehicle won the Pickup of the Year prize in Brazil and is now positioned second as soon as it was launched, actually, on a segment that has a lot of potential. 2016 is going to be an even more intensive year with the launch of 10 new vehicles. In Europe, we'll be launching the new Megane in its hatch, estate and GT versions. The new Scenic that was revealed in Geneva in March was also welcomed by the press. It will start sales in Europe in the autumn with a range that has been completely reviewed in almost 4 years. Renault in 2016 has the youngest range of all car makers in Europe, and its lineup has a very attractive design with new crossovers, Capture and Kadjar, top end that has been renewed with Espace and Talisman, the Talisman hatch and the estate, and now a very powerful range that proposes technologies at the best level with a complete offer from the C segment upwards. Now, in terms of connectivity with our Link 2, which is available on all our new models in the C and D segments, and the R-Link 2 that manages also all the features of the vehicle, sat-nav, telephony, and driving aids as well, and has become the control center through a big intuitive tablet that is adapted to automotive use. Now, in terms of safety, we have alert and protection technologies for very high-level active safety. We have the new Scenic now with 3 new features in the Renault range. We have the lane keep assist, we have active emergency brake assist, as well as pedestrian detection and fatigue detection sensors. These functions are bricks that will make it possible for us to go into autonomous driving or self-driving cars. In terms of driving pleasure, of course, we have 4Control and Multisense, and we are the first non-premium car maker to offer a system that can be personalized, associated with four-wheel steer. But we also have a range of diversified engines adapted to all uses. On the Scenic, for example, we have 9 engines with a hybrid assist offer, and this offer will make it possible for us to be best in terms of fuel consumption on the C segment. As far as the electric vehicle is concerned, the development of our offer is a key advantage. Renault is a leader in this market, and the sales of the group have increased strongly, up 49%. From 2015, and up 49% from 2014. And Zoe has become a leader on the market of personal cars with almost 18,500 registrations of the year. And thanks to this success, our ambition is to extend the access to electric vehicles to the largest number while maintaining our leadership. Outside of Europe, we are continuing in 2016 with our growth dynamic with new products in Russia. We are launching the new crossover based on our global access architecture. This new urban crossover with a four-wheel drive is adapted to the needs of the local market, and it will round off our offer of crossovers and saloon cars that are proposed in Russia. Renault, Nissan and AvtoVAZ now have a third of the Russian market, and Renault on its own has a 7 to 8% market share. Objective is to achieve 10%. In Turkey, we will also be launching a new hatch on the C segment, also for other markets in Eurasia. In Latin America, we will continue our offensive on the pickup truck market. Duster Oroch will now be joined by a 1-ton payload pickup truck, which was prefigured by the Alaskan concept. And this worldwide vehicle will also clearly show our determination to fill out our offer on the market of LCVs to become a real worldwide player. In Asia, of course, you know the priority is China, which is the main driver for growth in the worldwide automotive industry, with 25 million vehicles sold in 2015 and with a growth that is estimated to be between 4 to 5% in 2016. With our partner Dongfeng, we inaugurated our Wuhan plant in January, which has an annual capacity of 150,000 units, but we are already planning to double that. This is the first chapter of a very important story for Renault. We were able to build this new plant in 2 years thanks to the alliance by taking advantage of the experience acquired by Nissan in China. We are producing the Renault Kadjar there, which is being launched on the market right now in China. And on Monday, during the Beijing Motor Show, I revealed our new Koleos. China is also a challenge, of course, for the development of the electric vehicle, and the objective that has been fixed by Chinese authorities is very ambitious. They plan to have 5 million EVs and hybrid cars on the roads in 2020. We have agreed with our partner to produce electric vehicles locally from 2017 onwards. Lastly, in Iran, the lifting of economic sanctions in January is really going to help us to reinforce our activities in this country where we've been present over more than 10 years. We already have an assembly capacity of 200,000 cars per year, and now that the sanctions have been lifted, we will be able to activate that industrial lever, and our sales will progress very significantly in Iran in 2016. So as a whole, within very attractive and well-adapted range, thanks to a very high-performance industrial tool, our priority internationally is to really take advantage of all of our assets to establish solid positions on these markets. In 2015, we showed our capacity to take advantage of the quick recovery of an automotive market in Europe and also to hold out on emerging markets. In Europe, the Renault brand is the one that has progressed the most, and we keep our leadership position on the city cars segment with the success of the Clio and the Captur, and this performance has also been helped by our sales of LCVs, which have gone up by 17% compared to 2014. The Dacia brand has also achieved a new threshold in Europe, an increase of 3.6%, reaching a record level of 375,000 registrations in 2015. I'd like to thank Nicolas Moore, who was in charge of activities of Dacia in Romania, and now who won the President's Award for 2015. And since 4th of April, he has been appointed to the leadership of AvtoVAZ in Russia. Outside of Europe, we have maintained and reinforced our positions in spite of problems on the market and unfavorable currency situations. In Brazil, which is the second biggest market of the group, our market share achieved 7.3% in a market that was down by over 25%. Now, over more than 10 years, Renault has continued to extend its geographic footprint and continue to multiply its sources of growth and profit. It is this global presence that has made it possible for the group to not suffer from one-off problems in countries. And we are the leading automotive French brand in the world and the third biggest brand in Europe. And for 2016, we have two strong signals. First of all, we are back in Formula One, and motorsports, which is a source of motivation and pride for our employees, is also a very powerful lever that boosts our brand image, especially internationally. This is also a stimulation for our engineering to carry out technical breakthroughs that of course are an advantage for us vis-à-vis our customers, and we have doubled our R&D investment devoted to sports. And of course, our sports engagement, our motorsports commitment also is extended to Formula E, which is a fledgling innovative championship that we have joined from its creation as a technical partner. We won the first edition in 2015, and for the second season, our team has once again reinforced its position as a leader in the championship during the E-Prize in Paris. last week in front of more than 20,000 people. We have also announced the rebirth of Alpine. It's a project that generates a lot of interest and enthusiasm, and we have the concept car Alpine Vision that you can see in the exhibition here. The return of the Alpine is programmed for 2017 with a sports coupe that we will be unveiling before the end of 2016. Now, to end, I would like to come back to our third ambition, installing the Renault-Nissan Alliance among the top 3 of worldwide car makers. And today, we are the 4th biggest automotive group. The alliance is a source of strength for Renault. It is an alliance that has been built with a lot of patience over the last 17 years and which is quite unique in the worldwide automotive industry for its durability and its effectiveness. And that is why I would like to share with you my pleasure at the signing of the stabilization agreement for the alliance, which was signed by the French government and Nissan in December. All of the parties involved have recognized that the alliance has to continue to progress and develop synergies. I'd just like to give you a few concrete examples of the win-win contributions that the alliance has made for Renault. Our plant in Busan in South Korea in 2015 produced almost 118,000 Nissan Rogues for the North American market. That is 57% of its annual production. In the Cléon plant in France, almost half of its production of powertrains is aimed at our partners in the alliance, including Nissan, but also Daimler and General Motors. All of the vehicles of our C&D segments launched last year for Renault, or that will be launched this year, share a common alliance architecture. Lastly, without the alliance, of course, we would have found it impossible to build our Wuhan plant in China in less than 2 years. It is also partly thanks to the alliance that the commitments put into the competitiveness agreements in France and Spain are really being kept to. In France, from 2014 onwards, we decided to allocate more than 130,000 Nissan Micras to Flins, and the production is going to start this year. In 2015, the activity of our sites in France has increased considerably with a volume of production of more than 660,000 vehicles, that is up 24% compared to 2014. In 2016, this agreement will continue to bear fruit. We have, for example, announced the allocation of a new Nissan LCV that will be built in Sandouville. Thanks to the renewed competitiveness of our production sites in France, Renault has continued its recruitments in France and will continue in 2016. 1,000 new employees joined us with open-ended contracts and will join us, this year with open-ended contracts, as well as 1,000 new apprentices. The alliance is also means, of course, investment in R&D that will make it possible for us to be very ambitious for technologies in the future. By 2020, as we told you, the alliance will be launching more than 10 vehicles equipped with technologies that has different degrees of autonomy, and from 2018, of course, new autonomous self-driving cars are going to turn the car market upside down, and it is on these innovations that competition will play itself out. From 2018, we will be putting on the road vehicles that are equipped with systems to delegate power to the car, so with the ambition of being, from 2020 onwards, among the very first car makers to propose vehicles at affordable prices, making it possible for the driver to do other things than just drive. Now, by letting the car do the driving during the most boring phases such as when you're on the motorway or in traffic jams, this technology will make the road safer and more pleasant and will make it possible for drivers to optimize their time. And on connected vehicles, this year we will have new connected services for smartphones. Next year, the first multimedia system that is common to the alliance will be put into our cars, and in 2018 we will have a new internet and alliance connectivity platform that will give our customers a virtual private assistant for our private and fleet customers. And from 2020, combined with the development of self-driving cars, new onboard technologies will make it possible for drivers to do other things than drive when they are traveling. I suggest that we should show you some pictures of this roadmap that I've just described to you. This is our vision of the car of the future. So, ladies and gentlemen, vehicles are evolving extremely fast, and we are at the dawn of a new era, and Renault is very much a stakeholder. It is a French company which is now part of a group, a very strong group with 3 brands, and the Renault brand now has a burnished identity and an updated range. It is a worldwide company whose geographic footprint has increased and its growth potential has developed. It is an innovative company associated with a partner that makes it stronger. It is the fruit of a clear and proactive strategy defined and deployed over more than 10 years with the skills and the engagement and the commitment of our teams and with your support as shareholders. Thank you very much for your support. I suggest we should now welcome Mona Soperi, who is the EVP CEO's office, for the presentation of the Board of Directors roadmap. Thank you.
Mesdames, Messieurs les actionnaires,
ladies and gentlemen, dear shareholders, it is a pleasure for me to present to you the composition and the activity of your Board of Directors in 2015 and its roadmap for 2016.
Sa composition est à la fois représentative.
The board is made up of people who are both representative and diverse. It is made up of 18 members who represent different stakeholders. We have 4 directors who represent the employees and employee shareholders, 2 directors who are appointed by the French state, 2 directors who are elected on the proposal of Nissan, and 10 independent directors. Among these administrators, we have 5 women, that is 25% of the members of the board, and 6 directors who are non-French. This diversity certainly does contribute to the depth of the discussions within the board.
2 personnes ont rejoint le conseil d'administration.
In 2015, we had 2 new people who joined the board of directors. Mrs. Sherry Blair was elected to the board as an independent director by your AGM on the 30th of April 2015, and Mr. Martin Vielle, who is the French Commissioner for State Participation, was appointed as a director to represent the French state on the 9th of September 2015. In 2015, the Renault Board of Directors continued its action in favor of exemplary, responsive, and efficacious governance. It spent a lot of its time to do an in-depth analysis of certain aspects of the strategic plan of the corporation, and it paid special attention to the digital strategy of the company with its connected services and autonomous vehicles, as well as, of course, the optimization of the revenues of the company. Now, of course, we know that the digital revolution, which is the 3rd industrial revolution, is going to have an impact on mobility worldwide and is, of course, a major challenge for the automotive industry. Now, beyond these strategic orientations that are more long-term, the board also spent a lot of its time on subjects that were current events in 2015, the evolution, for example, of the situation of certain sensitive countries, including Iran and Russia, questions concerning the emissions of diesel vehicles, and the stabilization agreement for the alliance after the dual voting rights were implemented in Renault. And thus, the Board of Directors fully contributed to the defining and the carrying out of the group's strategy, while at the same time setting aside sufficient time for questions of current affairs. Now, let me present to you the detail of the Alliance Stabilization Agreement. Let me remind you that the implementation of dual voting rights in Renault modified the historic balance that had always existed between the 2 main shareholders of Renault, the French state on the one hand and Nissan on the other, because the French state now can use dual voting rights within the annual general meeting, whereas Nissan cannot use its voting rights. Your board of directors, ensuring that it did not interfere in the exchanges between the two stakeholders, did, however, follow up the discussions closely and proposed its assistance in the search for a durable solution that would stabilize the alliance. It contributed, therefore, to the concluding of the stabilization agreement, whose signature it authorized on the 11th of December 2015. This stabilization agreement is made up of two separate agreements. The first is between Renault and the state, which aims at putting a ceiling on the dual voting rights during the AGM. The state's voting rights are therefore capped at 17.9% or 20%, depending on the quorum of the assembly under consideration. Now, as far as the principle goes, this capping is first of all applied to decisions that concern subjects for which the ordinary AGM is competent, and the state can use all of its voting rights in principle for decisions that are of the competence of extraordinary annual general meeting. This general principle of capping, of course, does have several exceptions that I will not go into today, so as to keep things simple. But of course, all of these exceptions are in the public domain, and you can find them in our reference document as well. The agreement that caps the state's voting rights has been signed for a 20-year period and can be renewed. However, this capping will not apply in situations that are exceptional, such as the modification or the termination of agreements between Renault and Nissan, or the announcement of a public bid on Renault. We have a second agreement between Renault and Nissan that concerns the governance of Nissan. The relations between Renault and Nissan are governed, among other things, by a 28th March 2002 agreement, which is called the Restated Alliance Master Agreement, called the RAMA for short. The agreement of 11th December 2015 concerning the governance of Nissan is an addendum to the RAMA. This agreement confirms a governance practice that has been observed for the last 17 years between Renault and Nissan, according to which Renault votes in favor of resolutions that are put forward by the board of Nissan during its AGM, only for the following subjects: the appointing and the termination of the terms of directors on the board, the appointment and the termination of auditors, the compensation of the board members as well as the auditors. And Renault has also never submitted a resolution to Nissan's AGM and has never voted in favor of a resolution unless that has been discussed by Nissan's board of directors and approved by it. The signature of the Alliance Stabilization Agreement has made it possible to come back to a balance between the two shareholders, the French state and Nissan. Lastly, the Board of Directors has also chosen its roadmap for 2016. First of all, the board has decided to continue its gradual renewal, with the main focus being to bring more women on board and more non-French directors. The board today is therefore going to propose to the AGM the candidacy of Mrs. Q. The board decided that the appointment of Mrs. Q, who holds double French and Chinese nationality, would also contribute to the balance that we are looking for between men and women on the board, as well as the international point of view that comes from her expertise and will help the discussions of the board. Let me remind you that the group is today trying to develop its activity in China, which is the main driver of the worldwide automotive industry, and where Renault today Renault inaugurated its Wuhan plant in the month of February. And in addition to this, Mrs. Q is an engineer by training and is today the innovations director of Philips Lighting. Her experience and her thorough knowledge of the industrial world will help us to round out the skills that are represented on the board. Excuse me, says Mrs. Perry.
Voilà, reprenons maintenant.
Now we can start. The board also suggests also proposes to the AGM the renewal of Mr. Desmarais' term. Mr. Desmarais is today an independent director. He is the chairman of the International and Industrial Strategy Committee, and he's also a member of the Compensations and Benefit Committee. I have worked so hard preparing for this AGM, says Mrs. Seperi, that I've lost my voice. Now, in a context in 2016 that is extremely important in terms of strategic and geopolitical questions, your board was very responsive and efficient. Each of its decisions and initiatives, which served only the corporate interest of the company, will have been, first of all, the result will have been, first of all, to reinforce Renault, and secondly, to reinforce the position of Renault within the alliance, and lastly, to ensure the durability of the Renault-Nissan alliance. We can assure you, shareholders, that the determination and the commitment of the board of directors are very much still present in 2016 to ensure that we continue to keep ahead. I'll give the floor now to Mr. Thomas, who is an independent board of directors, an independent member of the board, and the chairman of the Compensations and Benefit and Compensation Committee.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Mrs. Seperi. I have been chairman of the Compensation Committee since 2015, and it is my privilege to introduce the components of the compensation package of our CEO, on which you shall be voting under resolutions 8 and 9 on the resolution 8 of the AGM. In keeping with the new provisions of AFEP-MEDEF, you are now asked to give your position on an advisory position regarding the components of the compensation package granted for 2015. This package is very carefully calculated, and it involves the work of a number of independent experts. Of course, the package is examined by the Compensation Committee, which I chair, and it is the first job for us is to assess the performance of the CEO. We have 6 directors, including 5 independent directors and 1 appointed by employees. We have Mr. Bilda, Mr. Desmarais, Mr. Garnier, Mr. Ladret de la Charrière, Mr. Persson, and myself. To work out the compensation of the CEO, we refer to benchmarks, that is, the compensation packages of leaders in similar companies, and we also have the services of a consultant company that specializes in human capital. This is important for the committee because it is well aware of the kind of compensation levels required to ensure the loyalty of the best talents. Resorting to this expertise enables us to ensure the relevance of the structure and indeed the level of the compensation package, especially in view of similar packages granted to other CEOs in other organizations. Of course, this is discussed in the absence of the CEO himself to ensure that the board can vote independently. Since 2015, the compensation package of the CEO has been submitted to the advisory position of the AGM under the say on pay provision. The compensation package is, of course, in line with the group's strategy. These are the components of the compensation package of the CEO in the year 2015 and to be voted on here. There are several components, therefore, a fixed part, which is paid in cash, a variable part, paid partly in cash and partly in shares, and that is dependent on the actual performance of the previous year, and then a long-term compensation bonus to be paid out by 2020, made up of so-called performance shares, I beg your pardon, to reward a future performance, but of course that is granted only if such performance criteria are met over the next 3 years. So the fixed part of the compensation for 2015, the CEO's fixed salary stood at 1.230 million euros. It remains unchanged for the fifth year running since 2011. For the variable part, that is the bonus, you have a number of performance criteria. The board of directors has demanding criteria in line with the company's strategy, both quantitative and qualitative criteria. With a view to transparency, this year Renault has decided to publish the individual components as percentages of the total compensation package, and so shareholders can see what the demands are in assessing the CEO's performance. So the elements are as follows. Return on equity 10%, operational profit 40%, free cash flow 40%, and there's a qualitative criterion to do with managerial quality. That itself is made up of 6 components, adding up to a total of 60%, and so each of these items individually weigh as much as 10%, or may weigh as much as 10%. The implementation of the competitiveness agreements in France, 10%. Synergies in the alliance, 10%. The quality of the environmental commitment, 7.5%. A multi-annual R&D strategy, 7.5%. Corporate social responsibility, 10%. Partnerships, 10%. All in all, the committee noted that financial criteria had been fully met and that qualitative criteria were met to a large extent. And so, therefore, the board, upon proposal of the compensation committee, decided that the variable part should be 145% of the fixed part compared with 147.5% last year. The variable part, therefore, stands at 1.783 million euros compared with 1.814 last year. The components of the long-term compensation bonus, as well as performance shares, which are also sort of a long-term compensation bonus, are allocated provided that certain criteria are met over a 3-year period, here from 2015 to 2017. For 2015, the CEO was granted 100,000 performance shares in line with the authorizations given by this AGM on 30 April 2013. The performance criteria are the same for all beneficiaries. There is one additional criterion, however, for the CEO. The performance criteria, once again, are in line with the group's objectives and strategy. The first one being free cash flow. The second one, the differential between the automotive COP, current operating profit, compared with the benchmark of other automotive manufacturers whose geographic and sectoral drivers are identical to those of Renault, and then an external criterion based on what is known as total shareholder return. A significant portion of the compensation package of the CEO is based on a number of performance criteria over several years, which makes it possible to ensure that the compensation package is indeed with the Renault's interests. Sorry, I'll give the floor back to Mrs. Lelay. Thank you, Mr. Thomas, for these explanations. And of course, all the details about Renault's governance are fully laid out in the registration document. And now I'll give the floor back to our CEO. Thank you, Mrs. Lelay. And so the time has come for us to for the Q&A session. We have about an hour for questions and answers. But before we move on to the first question, let's take a look at Renault's 115 years of sporting commitment.
En 1906, une 90 chevaux Renault remportait le Grand Prix de la CF. La Renault passe la ligne d'arrivée en vaincu.
La Dauphine 65 a battu tout le monde. Le sourire d'une princesse qui couronne une dauphine.
demande d'accueillir sa toute première Formule 1 à moteur turbo, cette numéro 15.
Avec tout d'abord le titre de champion du monde des constructeurs pour Renault. Renault, champion du monde des constructeurs.
C'est gagné. Renault, champion du monde.
Merci. Mesdames, Messieurs, Monsieur Ghosn et les
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ghosn and the members of the Executive Committee are at your disposal. As we told you at the beginning of the session, the written questions that were sent in before the AGM, the answers will be found on the Renault website in accordance with the law. We have hostesses with microphones. Bruce, put your hand up if you want to ask a question. And to ensure that the session goes well, please let me remind you that it's important to keep your questions short and clear so that we can take a maximum number of questions. I'll give the floor back now to the chairman for this Q&A session. Thank you, Mrs. Lelay. To begin with, let's start with a question that was asked by a shareholder during the 15th of April Shareholders' Day. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to take advantage of the meeting that you've organized with Renault's shareholders in Guyancourt to ask you a question. It concerns Alpine. I'd like to know whether in your mind, do you think that the Alpine cars should be the sports product of the Renault range, or do you plan to have a separate identity, a separate entity from Renault? Well, thank you for the question. I'll give you my opinion, then I'll give the floor to some of the members of the Executive Committee, and that way you will be able to get to know them, especially the new members of the Executive Committee. First of all, I'd like to say that Renault already has a sports range with the Renault Sport cars. We have the Clio Renault Sport, the Megane Renault Sport. We have a sports range. And what I said in my speech was that we will continue to develop this range. We are going to be doubling our investments in R&D for sports so that we can really position ourselves sustainably on this market. The Alpine is an extra choice on the sport premium market based, as its history shows us, on elegance, on agility and authenticity. Alpine is going to be led by an autonomous team that is dedicated within the group, within the Renault Group, to really keep the identity of Alpine and at the same time to take advantage of all that the Renault Group has to offer. We are showing the products and the concepts, and we are very soon going to go into action. This entity is being led by Thierry Koskas. And Mr. Koskas, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Alpine is an alternative offer, a new offer compared to the Renault Sports offer that you are familiar with. There are two main differences. First of all, this is the premium sports segment, but at the same time, it's not going to be just a sports car. It's also going to be a high-end premium car. And the car will also, of course, have inherited all of the heritage of the Alpine brand, which is translated by a very light, very nimble, very agile vehicle. And that is what our car is going to look like. And that really is what makes the difference. It's the identity of this car. We will be presenting it at the end of the year. We will launch it mid-2017. We've already shown the concept car that we've set up here for you in the exhibition as well. It is about 90% similar to the standard production car. We showed it in Monte Carlo about a week ago, and it was very, very enthusiastically received. So I think that we can count on enthusiasm when we launch Alpine. Thank you, Mr. Koskas.
Je donne la parole au panneau numéro 10.
Let's take microphone number 10, please. Let's hear your question.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
Good morning, Mr. President. I'm part of the Consultative Committee of Individual Shareholders. Do you think that the Renault-Nissan alliance has been reinforced by the stabilization agreement that was approved by the two boards?
Merci.
Thank you for your question. I believe the answer to that question is yes, says Mr. Gaulle. And you saw that while the negotiation was taking place, there was a lot of concern, there were a lot of articles, a lot of speculation. And of course, it took us time to sign the agreement because it had to be a good one. And as soon as the agreement was signed, all of this effervescence around the question stopped. Not only outside the company, but also inside, because within Renault, there was a lot of concern that these discussions might end up with diverging points of view within the alliance, but that is not the case. We are continuing to work together. We held the alliance convention. We have renewed our commitments in terms of synergy with the alliance, and we have reinforced the synergies we're looking for from the alliance. So I believe that in spite of the fact that it took longer than we would have wished for this agreement to be signed, but I do believe that it does reinforce the alliance. However, I'll give the floor to Mrs. Siberi because she followed this negotiation very, very closely, as well as the different agreements that were signed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I told you in detail about these agreements earlier, and I really think that the first virtue of these agreements was to ensure that our two main shareholders were able to come together around a table and hold discussions and get to know each other better, and to lay out clear rules that seemed fair and just to everyone. As I told you, this stabilization agreement is made up of two separate agreements. One that has been signed between the French state and Renault, and that concerns the capping of the French state's voting rights. This principle is very simple. As during an ordinary General Assembly, the state has agreed to limit, to cap its voting rights compared to what it had earlier, except for a few exceptions. The philosophy behind this agreement is that our reference shareholder has agreed with us that ordinary decisions should ordinary decisions concerns operational decisions within the company. And the exceptional questions concern things like the dividend, because that is really one of the first rights of a shareholder. And then, of course, the nomination, the appointing of the state's representatives to the board of directors. Now, the extraordinary general meeting, that of course is not day-to-day business. And when it's an extraordinary annual general meeting, in that case, the French state can use all of its voting rights, except in a few cases. For example, when we talk about financial resolutions, all the resolutions that are taken, that are presented every 2 years by all of the companies that are listed on the CAC 40, and that makes it possible for the company to manage its capital properly. And then with Nissan, I told you that we have been used to having certain governance attitudes, and it was simply that Renault, as a shareholder, does have its prerogatives, but it never ever has a hostile attitude vis-à-vis Nissan, either its board of directors or the company. And so Renault, of course, is one of the members of the board of directors of Nissan, and we would never present a hostile resolution for voting during the AGM of Renault. We would always discuss it first within the board of directors of Nissan. Now, this is something that we were able to write down, and because of this, thanks to this agreement, and now with this new agreement, everyone can express themselves, and I hope that this alliance has been reinforced for several years to come. Thank you, Mrs. Siperi. We'll take a question in the room, maybe microphone number 7. Mr. Chairman, Pierre-Henri Leroy, Prox Invest. I'm in charge. I work for many of your shareholders, and you announced 118,000 cars produced in Korea by the alliance. Is that what you said? I think that's a wonderful thing, and I hope that this General Assembly is not, this AGM is not going to be North Korea, because during this AGM we shouldn't be talking about the Alpine or the shareholders. We are supposed to be talking about the resolutions concerning the alliance and your compensation, especially. Now, the first subject, we've been shareholders in Renault for almost 20 years, and 15 years ago we approved the alliance that was signed with Nissan. It was fantastically negotiated. It is something that your predecessor really was determined to do, and he said that he would not have been able to do it without you, because so I know that you were a large part of it as well. And this alliance with Nissan is a very intelligent one, because it ensured that there was an exchange of cultures and skills that was quite remarkable, while at the same time ensuring that nobody's sensitivities were hurt, and by not generating any frustrations. At the time, the French state owned 44% of Renault. I would like to know now, why is it that if the French state now has 17 or 19 or 22%, I don't know how much it is, how is it that that has in any way been able to bring into question the stability of the alliance? There was no reason whatsoever to bring that into question. And that really surprised everyone. That's another point that I'd like to add. It's extremely astonishing because, we as shareholders, we're quite used to seeing the French state doing whatever they want. They wanted dual voting rights. We were against dual voting rights. But of course, the state did what it wanted to do, but that's just part of the stupid initiatives that we see the French state undertake every day. But I would like to ask my shareholder friends and the board of directors of Renault, how is it that a company that holds 44% of Nissan, because, that is what the alliance is all about. We've managed this alliance beautifully. I'd like to really, you speak many languages, you're very dynamic, you have a very rich technological vision. We have never ever doubted your steady hand on the wheel, and you're legitimate in this business. And you've done a brilliant job with Renault and Nissan. So it would never ever, no shareholder would ever ask for you to be dismissed. On the other hand, we can ask about your administrators, your board of directors, because I believe that your board of directors does not do its job when they renounce their role as 44% stakeholders in the industrial structure of Nissan. In Renault Nissan BV, both groups have put in their industrial and marketing tools. You know that, and therefore you set up that operation, and you're the chairman of it. You're the chairman of Renault, you're the chairman of Nissan, of Renault Nissan BV, and of Avtovaz. You hold all the reins in your hand, and today you've signed an agreement in which the French shareholders, which actually were, through you, the bosses of the whole alliance, you've actually given up on essential, vital rights on your own industrial tool. And for that, I'd like to ask the directors, is this your job? Is this what you were supposed to do? And for the compensation, for 15 years, you hid your compensation in Japan, and for years, the excellent Patrick Thomas, who's here, has given us figures for about 1 million, and it's never gone up to 7 million, and it never would have gone up to 15 million, which is what you earn together for Renault and Nissan. That's unacceptable. And that you have a lot of great qualities, Mr. Chairman, but I'm afraid you are not exemplary. So this is a question for the chairman of the board of directors of Renault, and I'm waiting for your answer. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. I must say that you were very generous in terms of my qualifications. I'm going to start believing what you had to say, but thankfully for me, I have a lot of experience, so I'll just look at the facts. Now, I think maybe you did not understand, you have not understood what is at the heart of the Renault-Nissan alliance, because you are thinking in terms of a power play. But if there was a power play in the alliance, we would no longer be here to be talking about the dividend of Renault, and you would not have the kind of growth figures that Renault has today, or the profit. Now, this alliance has had a lot of experience, and as you said yourself, the alliance would not have been signed if I was not ready to go to Japan, and Mr. Schweitzer said that himself. And I have been, therefore, very much a part of this alliance from the very beginning. I experienced this in Nissan in the beginning, where there was a lot of worry, very strong concerns about the survival of Nissan. And then I lived through it in Renault when I was given I was asked to be the CEO of Nissan, of Renault, while at the same time continuing to be the CEO of Nissan. Now, what I can tell you is that if there's one thing that we must learn about the alliance, that we must remember about the alliance, is that it will continue to prosper as long as there is this idea of partnership and trust within the alliance. As soon as we start looking at where the power is played out, it will come to an end. And what's quite extraordinary is that we have hundreds of examples of partnerships in the automotive sector and thousands of them in other sectors. And clearly we have learned from all these examples that a relationship based on the balance of power does not work. So you're telling me, we've given up on certain things. Why have we given up on that? It doesn't work, because as soon as you start looking at a balance of power, you lose. You think that we own 44% of Nissan. So going from 44% to Nissan doesn't mean anything. But owning 44% of a partner that is strong, that is growing, which represents a large part of the profits that actually pass through to you through the dividends, that's important. It helps. It is a partner that helps Renault be faster, to be stronger. It's a partner that is not jealous or envious. It is there that happens to pool a lot of its advantages that makes Renault stronger. Now, this is something that has demanded something very different from a balance of power. I was there in 1999. I was in a position of power. If I said, I'm going to sign this, I'm going to take advantage of this power play, it would not have worked. I can tell you that we are working with the Mercedes-Benz Group, and Dieter Zetscher, who is my counterpart in Daimler, had the same sort of experience as me. He was sent off by his group to work to be the chairman of Chrysler. And he said, we are in control, because Mercedes was a much more powerful, much more prosperous company than Chrysler. They had an alliance with Chrysler and Mitsubishi, and you know how that ended. And he himself will tell you today, Dieter Zetscher has told the press, he says, if we had been wise enough to start by defining what we can do together first, and then to set up the alliance, and if we had better respected our partners, we would not be where we are today, because Daimler has wasted 10 years in this partnership. You know that they wasted a lot of money as well. Chrysler was practically bankrupt, and Mitsubishi has been left considerably weaker. So I think we have to learn. Even if the history doesn't teach you about the future, it gives you a few lessons. Not maybe about what you should do, but certainly it shows you the bad results of what you should not do. That's what I can say about the alliance. Now, as far as my compensation is concerned, you know that I'm not the person who fixes my own salary. It's the board of directors that decides on it. It is prepared by the committee on Comp and Ben that is chaired by Patrick Thomas. We spent a lot of time presenting to you exactly how these wages are made up, so as to be transparent vis-à-vis you. You give us a delegation of power to the board to set up a salary, and you decide on that. You judge. And then the board of directors, decides whether or not the way in which the CEO is compensated is correct, is in keeping with the situation, his talent or her talent, etc. So I think that it is very important that you should trust your board of directors. Let me remind you that you elect the members of this board. And we are lucky to have a very diverse board with eminent personalities on it and who give their opinion every time they ask for it. So if, in my opinion, I think we have a process that's very clear and open. I can understand that people don't have the same point of view, that they have different sensitivities. I can understand. What I think is important is that we should have a clear, open process in which we all have our roles to play and we play them well. And the most important thing today is that Renault is growing. Renault is doing well. Renault has the right strategy. You're all shareholders, and I hope that you will continue to be shareholders of the group.
Le panneau 7 aussi, oui, il y avait une deuxième personne.
There was a second person on mic number 7. Yes, thank you. Christian Flammard, I'm an individual shareholder. Mr. Chairman, good afternoon. I'd like to ask you a question on the quid. Now, you have produced a new product and it's already had a huge success in India. Now, for this new product, can you tell us, please, can you tell us a little bit more about this new product and about the Indian market? Can you tell us also whether this product is going to be sold in other countries than India? Yes, thank you very much for this question. To use a very simple image, the launch of the Quid is a little bit like the launch of the Logan. Now, since you saw the launch of the Logan over 15 years ago, and many people had doubts. What sort of car is this? How are we going to sell it? Are we going to make any money with it? So that was the question. And now you know what's happened. You know that based on the Logan, we've built a whole range. It's called Dacia in Europe, and it is the spearhead of Renault's development in emerging countries. That's the Logan story. The Quid is based on a platform that is extremely innovative. It's made by our engineers, but it's based in India. This is a platform that had exceptional ambitions in terms of performance, and we had a lot of doubters. We had a lot of doubting Thomases. But now we have proved them wrong. And every time we launch a product, we don't really know whether we are very objective vis-à-vis our product. But today, when you see how the Indian market has reacted to it, when we see that we have more than 125,000 orders for it, we know that we've made the right decision. But it's not just one car, it's a platform. And behind the Quid, you're going to have 3 more variants. And this platform is not going to be based only in India. India is the most competitive Indian market. But if you make a success with one product in India, obviously you are going to want to export it or reproduce it elsewhere. So the Quid is going to have brothers and sisters to come on the same platform. We're now focused on India and on the Indian subcontinent. We have also said that the second step is going to be in South America with local development, and we are going to be going into every single emerging market. Now, will this product or the products of this platform, will they be sold in Europe? Today, it's not something that we've planned to do. It is basically meant for our product offensive in emerging countries. But, I'm never going to say no, a final no, because you never know what's going to happen with the market in 5 or 10 years' time. But today, our priority is India. We have to make a success of our sales in India. And then we'll have South America as our second step. However, Stefan Müller, who is in charge of all the regions, as you know, it's the very first time that you've seen Mr. Müller. So I'm going to give Mr. Müller the floor so that he can tell you more about this immediately.
Just a couple of more words on Quid. Quid we placed in the A segment in India. This is very important because over 30% of all private sales that we have in India come from the A segment. We believe very much in the Indian market, and we believe that the Indian market in the next years up until 2020 can grow to about 5 million units. And why do we believe that? We believe that because, if you take just one example, out of 1,000 people in India, only 20 have a car. If you compare this with China, the number is 100. If you compare this to Russia, the number is 300. You compare this to Europe, the number is 600. That's why we believe in the dynamic of this market.
Bonjour, quelques mots supplémentaires concernant Quid qui sera lancé dans le segment A en Inde. C'est un segment qui est extrêmement important pour nous parce que nous pensons que plus de 30% des ventes aux particuliers en Inde se feront sur ce segment A. Nous croyons beaucoup en capacité du marché indien parce que nous pensons que d'ici à 2020, nous pourrons développer le marché jusqu'à 5 millions d'unités. Et prenons seulement un exemple. Prenons le taux d'équipement automobile en Inde. Pour 1000 personnes en Inde, il y a seulement 20 voitures, alors que ce chiffre est de 100 en Chine, 300 en Russie et 600 en Europe. C'est pour cela que nous avons de grandes ambitions pour l'Inde et pour Quid.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yes, just some additional remarks. You will find it interesting that more than 50% of the first buyers of Quid have owned a motorcycle before, or a bicycle. And of course, we are very, very proud to say that at this point in time, after the car has been launched, we have been able to collect more than 125,000 orders, and we have a solid order book for over 50,000 cars.
Je vais ajouter un commentaire supplémentaire. Plus de 50% des premiers acheteurs de cette Quid possédaient auparavant une motocyclette ou un vélo, et nous sommes aussi très fiers d'annoncer que grâce à ce véhicule, nous avons pu engranger 125 000 commandes et que nous avons un carnet de commandes qui nous permettra de produire 50 000 véhicules.
Merci Stéphane. Nous allons maintenant prendre une
Thank you, Stéphane. We'll now take a written question, because this is a question that has been asked several times. Why is it that the preliminary results of the tests that were carried out on by the Royal Commission, why are these results bad for the diesel vehicles of Renault that were tested? What is the content of the improvement measures that were announced end of March by Renault? Will this be enough? This is an important question, and I think that it is important that we should be able to explain the position of the company very clearly. You know that in France, as in several other countries, the state decided to check that the diesel cars sold on the French territory were not equipped with a fraud software, cheating software. So this was the first thing. This is what happened after the Dieselgate. Now, before I give the floor to Mr. Bolloré, I'd like to remind you of 2 points. Firstly, the independent technical commission that was set up by the French government confirmed on the 14th of January that the vehicles of the Renault Group that have been tested were not equipped with any cheat system or any anti-pollution cheating system. The Renault Group respects the type approval standards for each market where its cars are sold, and it is true that the results of the tests carried out by the UTAC for the Royal Commission showed clearly that we still have a lot of progress to be made in terms of NOx emissions outside of the conditions that are defined by regulations. I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Bolloré, who followed this up with the engineering team from the very first day onwards, to give some figures and some results so that everyone can understand what is going on. Mr. Bolloré, yes, you're absolutely right. We saw clearly through the measurements that were taken by the UTAC for the Royal Commission, the Ségolène Royal Commission, that we still had a lot of progress to be made in terms of nitrogen oxide emissions, given the regulatory test conditions for Euro 6B. And that really is what is at stake here. The new Euro 6D standard, which will be applicable very quickly, and that Renault has constantly and vigorously supported. I think, first of all, we have to bring down the gap that exists between a regulatory test and real conditions of usage of our cars. And it's even more important because in the new Euro 6D standard, we will have a test that will be carried out in real conditions. this has been made possible because just over the last few years, we have on the measurement market, we have instruments that make it possible to capture these emissions and measure them in real time. These instruments did not really exist even 2.5 to 3 years ago. That's the first point. Secondly, now, what did we present? We did two things. Early April, we presented our plan for all of the existing cars to improve the performance of our depollution systems for NOx and Euro 6b. We were able to show that we can now extend and increase by 2 the temperature thanks to the EGR valve. And also, we have NOx traps that are much more efficacious in various conditions of use. And therefore, on an average, today, we can actually divide by half the gap that exists between real conditions of usage and the results that were measured in homologation tests for the extension of the functioning of the EGR valve. That's the first thing. The second thing is to talk about the future. We are putting the finishing touches to the new technologies that will really help us to fulfill the standards of the Euro 6D standard, which, let me remind you, we pushed for. We have all the technologies that need to be used, for example, much more high-performance EGRs, and also we are going to start using the SCR post-treatment system as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Bolloré. Let me remind you that the Renault Group is the only company that has zero emissions cars. We're the only ones, and we are leaders. And it's not just one car, it's a whole range. So with Zoe, with the electric Kangoo, with the electric Fluence, and with the Quid electric car, there are no emissions. We've spent more than 4 million euros on developing this range. And of course, we're going to continue to develop our diesel engines and ensuring that all our engines are as clean as possible. But we mustn't forget that us, compared to other groups, we've invested very strongly in a technology that we think is still central to the automotive industry, which is EVs. Now we'll take a question in the room. Let's take mic 2, please. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Mrs. Alonso, I'm an individual shareholder. I was surprised this year because I didn't get the convocation or the vote on the resolutions, and I don't know what good this box is, because I was given a catalogue and I was told, sit down and be good. You can vote later. I feel like I feel a little bit like I'm in nursery school. So please, could you please send us the invitations plus the resolution? This is very pretty. It's on glossy paper, but you know where it's going to go directly? Yes, I'm sure you've understood. I'm sorry. I'm going to ask my legal teams to immediately look at what happened and see why you didn't get the invitation to the AGM. They'll come and see you. Thank you. Okay. Well, certainly this is not a normal state of things. Of course, we will look at what happened. There's no interest, it's really of no interest to us. It's not in our interest at all to hide the resolutions from you. We need your votes. So, we will certainly improve on this situation very quickly. Number 5, please. Yes, Mr. Ghosn, Bruno Jaffray, I'm also an individual shareholder. My question concerns the future of Renault in the United States. Why is it that we don't use Nissan's network, which Nissan has almost a 10% market share? Why don't we promote some of the Renault range cars through that? And if that is going to happen one day, when could it possibly happen? Mr. Ghosn, yes, I think it's quite possible to take a Renault car and to put the Nissan badge on it, and just sell it in the US. But you should keep in mind that the cars sold in the US are models that have from the very beginning been developed for the US market. You cannot today pick up the Kadjar or the Espace or the Talisman as they are and send it to be sold in the US. You have to completely you have to thoroughly remake the car to ensure that it can be sold in the US. So if a car is to be sold in the US, it has to have the US standards in its genes. So maybe one day, I don't know when, but one day, of course, the American market will be open to Renault. There's no problem for that at all. But why are we not planning to do it today? Well, simply because we have our hands full. We have to transform the Tri in Russia. We are in Russia. We are well positioned. But we haven't finished our work there. In India, we are far behind all the other non-European brands. So we've got a lot of work to do. We've just entered China. Last year, we sold 30,000 cars in China. The whole car market is 25 million. So we are practically non-existent in China. Nobody cares about us. We have to build our position there. And all of this is going to demand a lot of resources, a lot of talent, because these markets are not easy to break into. So I don't think it's realistic to want to do this and to do it well, and at the same time to look at the American market. I think that a car developed by one of the partners should be sold by that partner. Because, of course, the brand and the people who work for that brand buy into that product. So if you ask Renault teams to sell a Nissan car, it's going to give you mediocre results. I've seen that several times. So the US is not a priority for Renault today, for a simple reason, because we need to make a success of China, of India, of Russia. We have invested a lot in these markets. We've developed the platforms. We're making the cars. Now we have to ramp up our presence there. Now, of course, we will definitely go to the US one day. Is it in the foreseeable future? I don't think so, because I think that in our next midterm plan, we are going to be focused completely on the conversion of the Tri that we've had in several emerging countries. Now, let's take microphone number 1, please.
Bonjour, Monsieur le Président.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Jean-Claude Benoit. I am a Renault retiree. I'd like to congratulate you for the results that you obtained. I have a question for you, though. For the Dacia range, do you think that we will one day see a Dacia with an automatic gearbox? Well, says Mr. Ghosn, thank you for your question. It makes it possible for me to have Mr. Bruno Ancelin answer a question. He is in charge of product planning and programs. Yes, the answer is yes, because we are renewing our equipment on the Dacia range, and we do plan to have a petrol engine with an automatic gearbox, as well as a diesel engine with the automatic gearbox. Thank you very much. We'll take another question in the room. Number 4, please. Mr. Dominique Gruzel, I'm an individual shareholder. I'd like to know, Mr. Ghosn, where exactly is Renault in terms of premium cars right now? And also, what do you plan to do in the future for high-end cars? Mr. Ghosn, well, I think that you have seen us, bring out cars that we consider are premium. They're premium cars for Renault, anyway. We've been working on them for several years, and we brought them out. And given the results and given the reception that these cars have been given, I think it's been a success. Let me tell you about the Espace, the Talisman. This has been true for the Talisman station wagon as well, and the Kadjar, and very soon the Koleos as well. All of these, so these are the new premium crossovers. And I would say that we are very satisfied with the reception of these cars, the way our customers have welcomed these cars. We've also conquered new customers. And so reconquering customers and repositioning Renault as a premium car maker will take time. But I do believe that the foundations for this are strong, coherent, credible, good quality products. It's too early early to really draw all the conclusions from this. But I think that we've got off to a good start. And I think that end 2016 or early 2017, you will see for yourselves that Renault has little by little clawed its way back into the top end, which means, with typically Renault products, but that are considered as being very high quality and very, very, very legitimate on the high-end segment. Number 3, please. Yes, Mr. Chairman, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. Jean-Pierre Delebel. I'm an individual shareholder, but I'm also a great fan of the Zoe and have been over the last 2.5 years. I think it's such a pity that I had to leave Renault when I have to take a car on a long trip. So do you plan to extend Zoe and apply it to the C and D segment cars? Mr. Gordon, yes, you're absolutely right, but I think you're running ahead of us, unfortunately. For us, today, we want to really ensure that the Zoe has a much bigger base. And I'm very happy to see that Germany has finally, just a few days ago, announced that they are going to actually put in tax incentives, for the purchase of electric cars. And that's going to help us with Zoe. Zoe is the leader of electric cars in Europe, but I think that it has a lot more potential than what we've seen so far. So we have to continue to develop the performance of Zoe in terms of its range, in terms of its power, and that is coming. You'll have a lot of innovations. However, of course, we're not going to limit our work to Zoe. There will be other electric cars that the product department is working on right now, and they will certainly round out the range. However, if we really want to change things on the automotive market, we have to work on the core range. Of course, you can always have premium electric cars, but let's not forget that the premium electric cars is about 8% of the TIV worldwide. And there's lots of car makers already battling it out on the premium segment. Whereas on our core segment, we're already legitimate. So our idea is to just extend this base little by little onto the market and gradually bring out vehicles that are extremely innovative. But I can't talk to you about them today because we are still defining the concepts. But you will see a lot of electric vehicles coming out by Renault in the future. Okay, I'm being told now that unfortunately we have no more time for questions, and so the Q&A session is now over. We are going to go into the period of voting on the resolutions, and for that I'm giving Mrs. Lelay the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosn. First of all, I would like to confirm that the quorum has indeed been reached for this AGM. Based on the attendance sheet, we note that present or represented shareholders represent 72.72% of voting shares, I beg your pardon. This is how we use the voting box. Your voting box is strictly personal. The number of votes that you have is already loaded in the box. The only keys you have to press are either the green, yellow, or red. Green means for, yellow means abstention, or amber means abstention, and red means voting against. It's as simple as that. After the resolutions are read out, it will be for you to vote. The words will be spoken. Voting is open, at which point you will see a little rectangle on the screen showing the countdown for vote. Once that countdown is over, well, then voting will be closed, and it will therefore be impossible for you to vote any longer, and within a few seconds, the actual outcome will show up on the screen. Please switch off your cell phones during the vote, and please return the voting boxes after the session. All right then, voting on resolutions. I will only read the purpose of each of the resolutions without reading the other details. Resolution number 1, to approve the consolidated accounts for 2015, producing a profit of 2,959,829,080 euros and 84 cents. Please press the box, the key of your choice on the box. Voting is open. Voting is closed. In favor, 90.64%, and so resolution number 1 is carried. Resolution number 2, to approve the corporate accounts for 2015, producing a profit of 663 million euros, 56,110 euros. Voting is open.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed. In favor, 90.65%, and so therefore resolution number 2 is carried as well. Resolution number 3, allocation of the profits for 2015. It is proposed to pay out a dividend of 2.4 euros per share, payable as of 17 May 2016. Please vote now.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed. In favor, 99.61%. Resolution number 3 is carried. Resolution number 4, to take note of the related party agreements under Article L225-38 of the French Code of Commerce and indeed authorized in previous years. Please vote now.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed. In favor, 90.09%. Resolution number 4 is carried. Resolution number 5, to approve the agreement between Renault and the French government under Article L225-38 of the French Code of Commerce. Please vote now.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed, and in favor we have 73.26%, and so resolution number 5 is carried as well. Resolution number 6, to approve the agreement between Renault and Nissan under Article L225-38 of the French Code of Commerce. Please vote now.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed. In favor, 84.27%. Resolution number 4 is adopted. Resolution number 7, to take note of the report of auditors on the items used to determine the interest served on redeemable shares. Please vote now.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed. And in favor, we have 90.64%, and so resolution number 7 has been passed. And so resolution number 8, to seek your position on the components of the compensation package of the CEO for 2015. Please vote now.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed. In favor, 45.88%. We do take note of the position expressed by the shareholders. Before we move on to the next resolution, and in view of the result of the vote on the 8th resolution, I would like to give the floor to Mr. Thomas, who chairs the Compensation Committee. Ladies and gentlemen, earlier on, I presented the components of the compensation package for the CEO. Under the AFEP-MEDEF code, it is for the shareholders to express their views on this computation method, and so we do take note of that negative view, and so therefore the Board of Directors shall convene after the AGM to assess the meaning of that negative vote, and so we will publish a press release to present the official position of the company. All right, thank you, Mr. Thomas. Now, let's move on to the next items. We have Martin Vial, who has been appointed by the French government to the board of Renault. There's no vote required for his appointment, since it was a ministerial decree that placed him on the French board. There will also be a video on Mr. Desmarais, whose term is being renewed, and Mrs. Olivia Q, whose appointment is on the table.
J'ai commencé mon parcours professionnel dans l'administration, au ministère des PTT.
I started working for the French Postal Administration, and then for 15 years I ran a number of companies, an airline called Aéropostal, and then I became in charge of the French post office, and then I became head of Europe Assistante, an insurance company, and then I became in charge of the French shareholdership agency since last year. This is an international company, an innovative company. It has resumed, it has now enjoyed economic growth and has a promising future. And of course, sitting on the board, I bring dual experience both from the private and the public sector. It will be for the French government to support Renault in its strategy, because we have full confidence in Renault's management board. And of course, we are always open for discussion. Thierry Desmarais. For 10 years, I worked as a civil servant, sometimes far away, for instance, in New Caledonia, and then also in the French government. But then I worked for Total for many years, and I was either CEO or chairman of the board, or both. I cannot really separate out Renault from the rest of the alliance. With the alliance, we've started a new universe. We have an international presence, and that has been a successful rollout, even though some countries are more challenging than others. During my last term as director of the board, I chaired the International Strategy Committee, and the reason I was appointed to chair that committee, this was no coincidence, because of course at Total, our revenue is almost 100% international, and I was able to provide my own experience at Renault. Actually, it can work both ways. It is for Renault to acquire market shares in developing countries, in emerging markets, and I believe that there again I can bring my own experience, my own advice as to how to go about it.
I'm currently Chief Innovation Officer for Philips Lighting, based in Netherlands. Before joining Philips, I was the head of strategic industry group for Alcatel-Lucent, based in Paris. Before that, I was the head of East Asia region for Alcatel-Lucent and also the CEO for Alcatel Shanghai Bell. My perception, a few words about Renault. I think the first, Renault is a leading car company, French and global. Renault is very special because of its special partnership with Nissan. When I think about Renault, I also relate it to electric car. I chose to become the board member of Renault for three things. First, I'm very interested in automobile industry, traditional industry, moving into new area like digital space. Secondly, I like very much the brand of Renault. It is French and it is global. Thirdly, it is because my personal interest, I like to work for a French company. I think my cultural background will help. I have Chinese background and also deep knowledge about Western culture. And secondly, my 20 years operational experience will also help. For example, I'm head of innovation for Philips Lighting. We have done a lot to transform a traditional industry into the digital space. Voilà pourquoi je suis impatiente de faire partie du conseil.
That's why I'm looking forward to becoming part of Renault's board of directors. Resolution number 9, to renew the term of Mr. Thierry Desmarais in his capacity as director for a period of 4 years. Please vote now.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed. In favor, we have 89.22%, and so resolution number 9 has passed. Resolution number 10, to appoint Mrs. Olivia Q as a new director for a period of 4 years. Please vote now.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed. In favor, 90.4%. Resolution number 10 is carried.
11e résolution.
Number 11, to allow the board of directors to trade in shares of the company for a maximum period of 18 months. Please vote now. Please vote now. I beg your pardon.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed. In favor, we have 90.30%, and so resolution number 11 has been accepted. Number 12 is to allow the board to reduce the capital by cancelling treasury shares. Please vote now.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed.
Vote pour
93.13% in favor, and so resolution number 12 is carried. Now we have resolution number 13 to allow the board to allocate free performance shares to eligible employees and corporate officers. Please vote now.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed. In favor, we have 90.88%. Resolution number 13 is carried. And so resolution number 14 is to allow the board to issue ordinary shares and share-like securities with preferential subscription rights. Please vote now.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed. In favor, we have 92.66%. Resolution number 14 is adopted. Resolution number 15, to allow the board to issue ordinary shares and share-like securities without preferential subscription rights through a public offering. Please vote now.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed. In favor, we have 87.28%. Resolution number 15 is carried. Resolution number 16, to allow the board to issue private placement shares and share-like securities without preferential subscription rights. Please vote now.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed. In favor, we have 90.78%. Resolution number 16 is adopted. Number 17, to authorize the board to issue shares and share-like securities without subscription rights or preferential subscription rights in case of a public exchange offerings at the behest of the company, of course.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed. In favor, we have 88.72%. Resolution number 17 is carried. And number 18, we have to allow the board to issue ordinary shares as compensation for payments in kind made to the company without preferential subscription rights. Please vote now.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed, and in favor, we have 88.01% of the votes. Resolution number 18 was accepted. 19 is to allow the board to increase the capital by integrating reserves and profits in the company's assets. Please vote now.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed. In favor, we have 73.12% of the votes. Resolution number 19 is adopted. Number 20 is to authorize the board to initiate a capital increase program for employees. Please vote now.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed. In favor, we have 92.03% of the vote. Resolution number 20 has passed, and resolution 21 is to give the board power of attorney for legal formalities. Please vote now.
Le vote est clos.
Voting is closed, and in favor we have 90.15% of the votes, and so that resolution has been accepted. So all the resolutions have been voted on, and I will now give the final word to our CEO. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this AGM has come to an end. I certainly hope it met your expectations. Once again, thank you for being here today. Thank you for the trust you have shown in this company. We have refreshments waiting for you outside. This will be your chance to have a talk with members of the executive board and indeed other Renault employees. And I suggest we wind up this AGM with Scenic, which is the new icon of our product line.